community. I think it's something I need to think more about, and you should too. What's up, guys? Welcome to this week's episode of Guns and Cameras. I'm pretty excited about this one. We have a feature film director who has directed the film Homestead, which is now available to stream on Angel Studios Network. He's also now directing a series spin-off that is also called Homestead, and it's all about a community of people who are having to rely on each other for survival after a dirty bomb goes off in Los Angeles and throws the entire country into a tizzy. Not, thankfully, our reality, but it is a possible reality should something like that happen. And it got me thinking, have I invested enough time and effort into getting to know my neighbors, into building a community of people in my neighborhood that I could faithfully call upon in times of crisis for help, support, survival, life or death kind of stuff? And the answer to that question is probably no, and I bet you guys probably have not invested enough either. This is not to scold you, it's just a friendly reminder that, hey, people are an important part of your doomsday strategy. So that being said, I'm gonna light this fire. You guys get into this week's episode of Guns and Cameras. Shooters, are you ready? Stand by. Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to a very special edition of the Guns and Cameras podcast. I'm your host, Joshua Best, and today we have Mr. Ben Smallbone. Ben is a director, an editor, and producer, and has worked on projects from all shapes and sizes, including music videos for bands like For King and Country. Fun fact, his brothers are Joel and Luke. He's also directed a number of films, including his most recent project, Homestead. It's also now a series available for you to watch on Angel Studios. Ben, thank you for being on the show with us today. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Man, thank you for that very kind introduction. I sound a lot more interesting when you're talking about me than when I'm talking about myself. But yeah, I've been a filmmaker my entire life. Fell in love with it in my teen years, made some films with my brothers that ended up winning a kids film festival. I remember where I won $400, and I was like, wait, you can make a living doing this? You make $400, and $400 as a 13-year-old is no joke. And then here I am over 25 years later, still just as passionate and care just as much about storytelling. You know, to me, I'm a Christian, and Jesus told parables for a reason, and he knew the power of story, and I think the power of story can change people's lives. It can give them hope. It can make them laugh for a moment. It can make them cry. It can make them feel things that otherwise you will never feel outside of, actually living that situation or that scenario. So, as filmmakers, we have an incredible responsibility of telling stories with purpose and meaning. And that's what I've committed my life to since I was a teenager. So yeah, excited to talk more about guns and cameras. I know both pretty well.
Dude, that's awesome. So let's start out with cameras. Ben, first off, what was your first camera? Do you still have it? And then what was when did your journey with visual storytelling start?
So my first camera, this is a test for the audience and how old you are, was a Sony VX2000. And it's funny because my journey started with Sony and now it's back to Sony, but I took a long journey through Reds and Aries and Blackmagic cameras in between. But my first camera was a VX2000. My parents bought it from Circuit City, which is not even in business anymore. For people that don't know, that was like the Best Buy of the 90s. And they bought it. I want to think they spent $3,000 or $4,000, and for a good 2 years, that was my toy every single. I didn't have toys. My camera was my toy, and I experimented and made dozens and dozens of short films. Majority of them terrible, but one was actually pretty good, and we entered it into a film festival, a little kids film festival in Nashville, Tennessee, and I won $400. And at that moment, I was like, okay, this is what I want to do. And my family's all in music industry. We're all artists in a way, and I played drums for about 3 years and realized very quickly that unless I really sold my soul for it, I wasn't going to be that great. In a city of thousands and thousands of great drummers, I was never going to be as good. But beyond that, as a drummer, I wouldn't have an opportunity to tell the stories that I wanted to tell. And I quickly realized that if you combine a great visual with a great story, with music, great music throughout, you have a way of skipping the mind and going straight to the heart. And that's what I wanted to do. I was so moved by content that I saw in my teen years that really impacted my life. And these are people that are, playing make believe for a career. Like that's what we do as filmmakers. But when you do it right with an impactful story and great visuals, again, it has a way of skipping the mind and going straight to the heart and impacting you in ways that no other art form can. And so that's why I decided to do this crazy thing we call filmmaking.
Dude, that's awesome. What was some of your what inspired you? What were some of those early stories or those early films that you saw that really kind of gave you the motivation?
Well, gosh, I don't think this is a word, but de-inspired might be a better word. I saw a lot
Okay.
of faith-based content in the 90s that even as a teenager, I was like, this is awful, guys. Um, and I had this dream of like, hey, we can be better than this. For so long, for hundreds of years, Christians were the leaders in the arts and entertainment industry, whether it was, the beautiful tabernacles that were built throughout Europe or the paintings, even some of the early days of music and storytelling through film and books. Christians were the leaders in arts, and we lost it in the last 100 years. And so I would watch this, almost all of them were post apocalyptic, actually, which is unique because that's what Homestead is. But in the 90s, they were
Mm-hmm.
coming out every other month. And me and my brother would joyfully initially go and sit and watch these really bad films in theaters and sit there as 15, 16 year olds going, gosh, we could do better. Why aren't we doing better? And so in the middle of that, I discovered, Steven Spielberg's films. I saw Jurassic Park. It was my first PG-13 movie, Jurassic Park. Became obsessed with Indiana Jones to the point where we actually made spoof Indiana Jones films where we would reenact whole sequences all the way down to the timing of the cuts and the music and learned a lot from Steven Spielberg. But then I saw Gladiator. Gosh, what year did Gladiator come out? I was in my late teens, and it was at that
Mm-hmm.
point. I know that's so stereotypical of a lot of filmmakers, but Ridley Scott and Tony Scott, they really kind of reinvented storytelling in so many ways and had such a visual flavor and style to their content, but also
Mm-hmm.
powerful, deep, emotional storytelling. And the combination of that is just incredibly powerful. And so that really kind of lit my fire for wanting to do what I do now.
Dude, I get that. I can relate. I remember asking that question when I was younger. I was like, why can't we make stuff that is as good or if not better than mainstream? That was always my struggle too.
Well, and back then, Joshua, back then, it was dollars. Like, think about it. In the 90s and 2000s, everything was shot on film. Anything good was shot on film.
Mm-hmm.
So therefore, you had thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars just on a camera and the film that it took. The investment was huge. We now live in a day and age where we don't have that excuse anymore. Man, you can go buy a camera at Best Buy that you could make a film and put it up on the big screen, and you can pay $29.95 for Adobe Premiere and edit that content at home. So the excuse of all of that being outrageously expensive, I remember my first computer, my legitimate first computer in the year 2001. I spent $7,000 on that computer to try and edit footage, and even then it was awful. Now you can go to Best Buy, buy a camera for a few $1,000s, buy a computer for 900 bucks, and you can literally make a movie. So technology is no longer the limiter of what we can create. I'm really hoping that in the next few years, there is such incredible content coming out of young filmmakers.
Dude, I hope so too. I'm stoked about it. I think the opportunity for people who are have a desire to tell a story visually is, I mean, it's unreal right now, right? So it's a lot of it's just finding motivation, because I know that right now, and this kind of goes into the next question when it talks to about kind of cultural and content, where we're at with, not just the art form of it also, but acting, right? Color, all that stuff is the impact of social media and what I'm calling, and I'm sure others call it this, but like 15-second cinema or 60-second cinema, where the majority of the content we're consuming is so it's diluted down to these really short snippets of like a lot of intense action, and it's more about the psychology of capturing your attention than it is about pulling the heartstrings of people's emotions. What are some of your thoughts on that, and how are you trying to, as a narrative filmmaker, storyteller on a large scale, how do you see that impacting you as a creator?
Great question. It's a real thing. I've been in the industry for over 20 years, and I've seen the transition of, the content, and now it's like the studios are coming to you going, hey, you got to have something really awesome in the first 60 seconds,
Mm-hmm.
because otherwise they're going to switch on to the next, especially with streaming, they're going to switch on to the next, series. And so you got to have something that grabs that audience in the first 60 seconds, otherwise you're in trouble. But I think, my training ground was music videos. And
Mm-hmm.
what I found in those music videos was if I could tell a story in 2.5, 3 minutes that grabs the audience's attention, both visually
Mm-hmm.
and story, with, some kind of story, or, a lot of it's metaphorical or abstract, but, get them to go, okay, I want to watch the end of this 3.5 minutes. Then if I can do that in 3.5 minutes, I can do that in an hour and a half. And so
Mm-hmm.
for over a decade, I did hundreds of music videos, dozens and dozens of commercials, and I learned the art of storytelling in 30 seconds, 60 seconds, and
Mm-hmm.
3.5 minutes. And
Mm-hmm.
I think what a great proving ground. I think so many filmmakers want to just like jump straight to, I'm going to make a feature film. But guys, there's a lot of things you got to learn before you jump into it. Play all the roles, learn how to tell a story in 15, 30, 60 seconds, at least something that hooks them.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that was kind of the best experimental space for me as a filmmaker, was figuring out how to tell short form stories. And then ultimately now, I've got 30 minutes in these episodes, or an hour and a half in a movie. And I use a lot of the same formulas. I use a lot of the same tricks, and you got to have something in the first 10 to 15 seconds visually that grabs people. And I believe in the first minute that makes people go, okay, I'm going to invest the next hour and a half of my life to this project. And either has to be some kind of emotional story hook, or I think some kind of visual hook in that first minute. Otherwise,
Mm-hmm.
with this generation and the way they consume media, they won't stay till the end, and they'll skip right on to the next episode. In the theaters, we have a better, I've done quite a few theatrical releases. They paid, $15 to cut, and, $30 if you count popcorn and a
Mm-hmm.
drink, to sit in the movie theater. They're stuck there. They're going to watch. You've got a longer ticking time clock to grab their attention. In episodes and series, and specifically things on YouTube or streaming,
Mm-hmm.
you got to have something that hooks them in that first 60 seconds. Otherwise, you are done.
Do you think, I wonder, I just had this thought. I'm like, I wonder if they have metrics on Netflix and stuff like bounce rate. You know how they have on, like for digital advertising and marketing now, they have all this data and analytics that you can get back. I wonder if they have that same kind of feedback. I'm sure they do, coming from like feature films. Like people get halfway through. Once I start a movie, I'm pretty much committed to finishing it, just because it's, that's how I grew up watching movies. But I wonder if this next generation is like halfway through, or even 2/3 of the way through, and they're like, nah, I don't need to see the rest, and they bounce. You know.
Absolutely. They have that data. They're pretty protective of that data. Angel
Mm-hmm.
Studios, who we're working with on Homestead, is not protective of that data, and they share it with us pretty frequently. And so we see the drop off rates, and it's really discouraging and encouraging, and you're able to study it and learn from it. But what's really cool about Angel Studios is they have over 1 million subscribers, and they do this thing called the guild process, where you make your first
Mm-hmm.
rough cut of your episode or your movie, and you run it through the guild, and a certain percentage of the guild has to vote whether it's going to become an Angel Studios project. And in that process, they they harness all kinds of data. And how long are people watching? Where do people drop off? Are they making it past the first 5 minutes? Are they getting 33 minutes in and then something happens in that 33-minute mark? They're like, oh, screw that. I'm done with this. And we're able to watch that and learn from it. And it's like the best, biggest test audience ever. And I gotta
Mm.
believe that Amazon Prime and Netflix and all the other big streamers are going to follow suit at some point with their content and be able to track those numbers and refine. Like, I think there's a
Mm.
version of Netflix a few years from now or Amazon Prime where they actually refine, re-edit the episodes based off the data that they're seeing. They're not doing that yet, but I could see that coming, and we could actually do that at Angel Studios.
So how do you feel about that though? Because that's a question. Like for me, I struggle a little bit. Right, my background right now, I want to make the jump. My goal right now is to move into long form production, feature film, narrative stuff. Because I've been doing commercials for forever, and I'm trying to move into again longer format stuff. But I also have a desire to want to be able to tell the stories the way I feel they should be told. Is data driven storytelling, where you're basically saying you have to make a decision on the actual narrative based off of data metrics versus how the emotion is driving it. Do you think, does that bother you just a little bit, or how do you feel about that?
I think if I was taken out of the director seat and the studios are making those cuts and edits themselves, absolutely, I would, I would panic.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, but for example, on Homestead, on the movie, we had thousands of comments come in.
Mm-hmm.
And what I look for as a creative is you don't look at the singular voices. You don't look at the singular voices. Even if I have a friend come to me and go, hey man, I hate the opening of the movie. If nobody else says they hate the opening, I'm probably not going to listen to my respected friend. So what I listen for is the
Mm-hmm.
choir. The choir
Sure.
of voices all saying the same thing. I hate this character. I hate this character. Or I hate this scene. Those are the moments you look for and you go, oh gosh, guys, maybe I am too close to the project. Maybe I can't see the forest from the trees. So like
Mm-hmm.
the choir is what I try to listen to. And even then, we had thousands of comments on the movie Homestead, and we probably listened to five of them. And the movie legitimately got better after that. And
Oh,
Hollywood's been doing it for decades with test audiences where they sit in a movie
yeah,
theater
yeah,
and the
yeah.
and the filmmakers sit in the back of the room and they watch how people are responding. Do they laugh? Do they cry? Do they feel anything? Do they look at their phones? Like this is the version of that in the digital age, and they can do it completely online with much superior numbers that we don't even have to pay for.
True. That's a good point. So I guess that if in that light, if you keep it as feedback, I think that's great. My biggest fear would be having like studios say, hey, data says you got to change this and you have no choice. Basically, data driven direction, right, would be my fear.
That would be
But
scary. And that would be a dangerous rabbit trail as storytellers that want to see your fingerprints and your DNA on your
mm,
projects. That would be scary. I would object to that.
true. So moving on, what is it like to work with actors, right? A pool of actors having talent like Neil McDonough on your project, but also like he's been around for forever, but also some of the younger talent pool that's up and coming. What are some of your thoughts on working and directing with talent?
Terrifying, exciting. It's showing up on set. Yeah, I'm in my 40s now,
Mm-hmm.
but I have struggled with my entire career, at least the last 20 years, feeling like I'm always the kid in the room. I'm the
Mm-hmm.
least experienced. I don't know what I'm doing. The imposter syndrome is very strong with me. Every time I show up, I'm like, well, that guy's being, the grip and the gaffer and the DP have been doing this twice as long as I have. And Neil McDonough's worked on 200 projects. Who am I to direct this guy and tell him what he should say or how he should say it or what he should do? The beauty of filmmaking to me and what attracts me to it and keeps me passionate about it is it's like unlike anything else in the arts. Think about it. A book writer goes into the basement and writes a book. A songwriter sits in a closet with his guitar, writes a song. No filmmaker gets a film made by himself. It is a
Mm-hmm.
full blown collaboration, and you're rewriting the script from the moment it's written to the edit to sitting down with the actors in a table read to actually shooting the scene. Like, guys, if you watched
Mm-hmm.
what we got with Homestead in comparison to what was written on the page months before, it is night and day. And so bringing the actors in as collaborators and harnessing their experience and their voice and letting them explore things is something that I love, and they love it. You know, they don't want to just show up and deliver lines on the page. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and it's you know it's a really exciting process. We had Dawn, who plays Jenna in the film, and you know, a week before she shows up on set, she's with Taylor Sheridan filming the last season of Yellowstone, and a few months before that, she was shooting 1883, and then she's done another
Mm-hmm.
show with Taylor Sheridan called Lioness, and here I am going, "Hey Dawn, you know that scene was awesome, but try this." And she's like, "Who are you?" No, she didn't say that. But the collaboration and like the fear, at least the first day, everybody's such an imposter. The first day I
Mm-hmm.
show up on set and I just met these people, and you know they think I'm much younger than I am, you know, and that I'm haven't
Mm-hmm.
done as many projects as I have because you know IMDb doesn't show all the commercials that I worked on for years. It doesn't show all of the music videos that I did back in the early 2000s with a bunch of different artists. It doesn't show even some of the films that I've worked on and projects that were union and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not union, so I couldn't get credited. And so
Mm-hmm.
they go, who is this guy to tell me that? But by day 2 or 3, once they start to feel the energy and passion that I have for the project, once they start to see some dailies coming in going, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that was really cool. And the direction that he gave me actually saved the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And then how now we're heading into, you know, the third round of shooting Homestead season 1 and 2. And all of a sudden now there's this really exciting shift of every actor that shows up is excited about what we're doing. They believe in what they're doing. They know what we're doing is going to make them look good and they're not going to look like fools and idiots. I mean, that's every actor's fear, right? Is showing up on set with a director that doesn't know what he's doing, or a DP doesn't know how to light them, or a camera
Yeah.
operator that's constantly messing the shot up, and they end up looking like a fool for signing up for this TV series or this film. But at this point, this far in, it's starting to get really exciting because the directors all, you know, the actors all look at me as a legitimate director, and we're doing this together, and we're collaborating, and we're making something really exciting and special.
That's awesome. So let's talk a little bit about Homestead. So, first off, you got some big stuff coming up. What are you excited about moving forward as the story starts to progress? And then what has the impact of making this project been on not only your life, your family's life, but also how you see it impacting our culture?
Um, Rewind back. First question there.
So, first question, let's start with what are you stoked about that's coming up in the Homestead series?
So I'm actually sitting here in Salt Lake City, Utah. Already started on prep on 6 more episodes of Homestead. And
Right on.
guys, the movie's great. We released it in the theaters. Did pretty well in the box office. It was in top 10 for I think 3 weeks. We made almost $22 million. And we made this for less than the $4 million. So you know it's already almost paid back, which is really exciting. And then
Awesome.
the series kind of continues that story. We shot 2 episodes last year, released that. That's also done really well. The story as we get into the episodes becomes much more interesting. You know, I think in the film, in the story, and in real life, if anything really like this happened, as time passes, the intensity is going to grow. People are going to become more desperate. You know, you're not only going to have dangerous people outside the gates of the homestead, but now you have dangerous people inside the gates of the homestead. And to me,
Mm.
that's when the story starts to get really interesting, is when you don't know if you can trust the person that's sleeping next to you in a tent. And you've got people with guns coming to your gate demanding food and supplies and your ammunition. At any moment, you're on the precipice of life and death. And we, without getting anything away, um, episode 3 and 4 of season 1 of Homestead are unlike anything we've experienced so far. And I'm really excited to shoot it. I'm really excited for people to see it.
Dude, that's awesome. What do you think? So this kind of goes. This we mentioned this kind of before we started recording, but what do you think the impact of shooting a project like this, right, has on? It's going to have on the talent, but also on you moving forward. Being in this environment of kind of thinking about if society were to collapse, if this was to happen in real life, how is this story that is fictional at the moment impact your actual life and decision making processes?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I've been asked it a lot over the months and years working on it by both cast and crew and media as well in
Mm.
interviews. Yeah, I've kind of studied this a lot more since becoming a part of the project and getting really excited and passionate about it. Every civilized nation since the beginning of time goes through 300-year cycles of success and collapse.
Hmm.
And arguably, the United States hasn't had a collapse yet. And so, based off history, some kind of collapse is inevitable. Will it be as destructive as the Roman days, or uh, the wars of England back in the day? Like, what will it look like? Who knows? Will it look
Mm.
like what we have in the movie? I don't know. But I think there's an element of, especially me as a Christian, I don't want to live in fear. But
Sure.
I think being prepared can allow me to not live in fear. And so people came to me all the time after we made the movie and said, "Hey, if what happens in the movie happened in real life, how would you do?" I'd be like, "Oh, I'm dead." Well, here I am 2 years later. I actually think I might have a chance of survival. And I think beyond some of the preparations that I've made with me and my family, I
Mm.
think there's an element of Homestead that a lot of preppers probably don't agree with, that I think they would have to adjust their thinking on this based off what I've seen. And that is,
Mm.
this is not about living on an island or finding the most remote cabin in the woods and surviving alone. I think in an end world situation, community is going to be essential. And that is
Right.
such a big part of this story. And so building alliances with your neighbors, finding people that can do things that you can't do well, whether
Mm.
that's the special force soldiers that you invite to be a part of your prepper plan, whether that's access to a doctor. These people, you can't do all of those things. And in an end world situation, you're going to need all those things. And so the
Hmm.
Homestead project has kind of opened my eyes to the reality of, because I've always thought, I'm going to grab my siblings, I'm going to grab my immediate family, and we're going to flee to my parents' farm. My parents own 45 acres just outside of Nashville in a rural
Hmm.
area. And we're just going to go there, and they have horses and chickens and cows and goats and sheep, and we would probably eat a few of them. Sadly, they all have names and they're pets, but in a situation like this, I don't know if they are pets anymore. But
Nope. Food.
in in that situation, uh, we would be just on an island by ourselves, and we would be fair
Yeah.
game. And I think the people that are going to survive really well are either 1,000 miles away in the middle of nowhere, Alaska, with their immediate family and lots of supplies, or people that are willing to create community, to invite their neighbors into the process to survive together. Because the reality is, we are stronger together than we are
Hmm.
apart. And I see that the same in the apocalypse. And yes, in that, do you have to trust people that might be a little sketchy, and are there going to be some sneaky people just like in the series that get through the gates that you allow into your home that you end up having to figure out how to eliminate? Possibly. But I do think in the end, being able to trust people and invite your friends and family into that community of surviving together. So that's a message that I've said from day one to cast
Mm.
and crew, is like, I think the element of being prepared is not living in fear. And two, I think creating community and a plan with your community of how you're going to survive together is essential. Just as much as the bullets and the ammunition and the guns and the water supply, food supply, what's your plan there? I think you got to have people. People are a resource that you desperately need in a situation like this.
100%. I agree with you completely. Yeah, community is everything. And I think that's a message that I think is important for even the niche that I come out of right now, the niche I'm serving, the world of the defense industry, 2A people, right? That is a big one, is community, because that's a lot of the guys that I work with have the, I'll be alone on an island with, a mountain of ammo and a whole bunch of machine guns and I'll be fine. And it's like, yeah, you can have that, but you might just be building a stockpile for somebody else to come capitalize on, right? If you get taken out. So on that note, speaking about guns and ammunition, what has your experience been? I know you grew up in Australia and you moved to the States. What's your background with firearms?
So I had never seen a legitimate gun outside of a police officer or like my cousin's. He had an air rifle that they shot possums with on his farm in Australia. So outside of that, my experience with guns was very limited. There was a massacre in Australia in the 90s, and they famously
Mhm.
um, successfully removed almost all guns throughout the entire country. And yeah, it was a really dramatic moment, especially for some of my relatives who had guns that I didn't know existed, and they had their guns, taken away. And there was
Mhm.
always, this terror and fear of like, well, the people that shouldn't have guns are going to still get the guns. Somehow, in the island nation of Australia, with only a population of 30 million, it's been semi-successful. Do I agree with it?
Mhm.
No. Coming to the United States, the land of the free. Gosh, I remember the joys of first experiencing like live fire. Beyond that, fireworks. We didn't have fireworks in Australia.
No way.
Outside of
I
professional
didn't know that.
fireworks, yeah, you can't get fireworks. And so, like the
Really?
few things when we first came to America that I remember being like, this is incredible. Like, what a symbol of freedom where you can go to a fireworks stand and buy fireworks that literally could kill you. At the same time, have a gun in your car at the same time that could kill you. Um, but anyways, I early in my filmmaking career started doing hunting videos for a gentleman in Nashville and traveled all over the country doing hunting videos. And
Right on.
through that, I got to see real firearms, and I
Nice.
learned how to handle them safely. I learned how to film them safely. That was a whole thing. And then
Mhm.
also trying to get the shots needed without scaring away the turkey or the deer. That was a whole uh, I felt like I went to film school just for that, which was really fascinating process. But that was when I first was introduced to guns, and then since then, obviously through this project, have handled a lot of real firearms, a lot of realistic fake firearms. That's been one of the fun things too. Is people watch the series and the movie, and they want to know what kind of guns we're using. 98% of the guns in the show and the movie are airsoft guns that have been
Mhm.
manipulated to make look as realistic as possible, which has been a really fun way because we're since some of the shootings that have happened on film sets recently, it is
Mhm.
almost impossible for a low budget film to do live fire, even with blanks, because
Mhm.
of what happened recently in New Mexico. Insurance companies want to insure your project. You'll have to have multiple armorers, and then the insurance company wants to know who they are, and they want to research them. And so we knew from the beginning of Homestead that majority of our weaponry was going to have to be fake or
Mhm.
airsoft. And so thankfully, the creator of the show, who wrote the books that the movie and the series is inspired by, is a gun specialist, and so he's been able to like walk hand in hand with me through the process of how to make these scenes as realistic as possible without using blanks, or any kind of live weaponry or real guns. There are a few guns on the set that we had the pins removed.
Mhm.
The machine gun at the end of the movie was one of those, but everything
Mhm.
else is either replicas or airsoft guns.
Oh, the creature comforts, right? You guys, we are halfway through this week's episode of Guns and Cameras, and that means it's time for me to tell you it's been brought to you by 1156 Productions. If you need high quality film or photo work for your brand, be sure to go to 1156productions.com. Reach out to me, I'd love to work with you. Also, this episode has been brought to you by Tokens of Valor. Tokens of Valor is my boutique ballistic jewelry company where I take components like brass and copper and I combine them with sterling silver to create one-of-a-kind, hand-forged, wearable works of art. If you're interested in getting a custom piece made for yourself, go to Instagram, go to @tokensofvalor, send me a DM and we'll get something started for you. But also, more information to come on this. I'm working on a Tokens of Valor website where you can go and check out pieces that have already been made that are still available and maybe custom order pieces for yourself. So be sure to stay tuned for the information on that. Also, speaking of all these websites, if you go to 1156productions.com, go to the brand store. I got all kinds of merchandise for guns and cameras, like these dope t-shirts. I got tank tops, I got stickers, I got patches. If you buy something from there, thank you so much. All the proceeds are just going back to keeping this dream alive. and hopefully getting a studio where I can invite guests out. The plan is to grow, so if you buy something, thank you for supporting this dream of mine. Speaking of dreams, it's been a dream to have Ben Smallbone on as this week's guest. He is a film director, has directed the film Homestead, the series Homestead, which is now on Angel Studios network for streaming. You should check it out. He's the brother of Luke and Joel from the For King and Country band, a legendary story, legendary family, especially in the Christian content community. A lot of great stuff coming up in the second half of the episode, so while I get into roasting some marshmallows and maybe a hot dog or two, y'all enjoy the second half of this week's episode of Guns and Cameras. A little bit hot, isn't it? Are you a hot dog? That's crazy. That makes sense. I think that's good. I think that's an important piece of information, especially for my audience to hear, right? Because a lot of us, again, we work with live fire all the time, right? But we're also, it's kind of like the Wild West of videography or cinematography for a lot of the the creators in this industry, because we're working with, either the actual manufacturers of the firearms or the soft community, or, tactical training companies that are working with law enforcement that are running live fire drills, right? So there's a huge amount of safety, but there's also most of us as creators can only imagine what it would be like to work on a scale that is, or a project that is the scale of Homestead, and forget that, hey, that's, insurance is important for productions like that. Safety is important. Again, learning from the mistakes made on previous projects now with, I don't even have to get into that, but that is something that you need to consider, because I think for us, we like to think, we find a way to make it happen. And it's like, that may not be the case. And thankfully, airsoft is crazy. I mean, we picked up some airsoft guns and we used them in some shoots not too long ago, and those things are crazy close. I mean, they're pretty realistic toys, really. I mean, they're not, you know what I mean?
Yeah, the biggest issue we've had is the recoil. So if you or your audience has ideas on how to replicate recoil without blanks or any kind of live fire, that's the biggest issue. And in some of our scenes, we're training the guys to, when they pull that trigger, because the airsoft guns do give a little bit of a sound and a little bit of a kick, but it's never realistic enough. And so we actually use visual effects on multiple scenes to move the gun more dramatically in the actor's hands, because we were so frustrated with the lack of realistic recoil on the airsoft gun. So we're still trying to figure out a better way to pull that off. But yeah, sadly, with the budget that we have, and because we're SAG, there's so many protections of SAG actors that it makes it really, really difficult to ever do live fire. And when I say live fire, even then, it would only be blanks. Actually shooting real bullets is virtually impossible on a Hollywood project nowadays.
And that makes sense. Blanks, I think blanks would be the next. That would be the thing I think people would want to argue. I should almost talk to some of the manufacturers I know and be like, hey, here's a problem in Hollywood. How can we simulate recoil realistically without using something that's a blank gun?
Yeah.
Because we did, at I was down at SHOT Show, which is the big, it's the biggest gun show on earth in Las Vegas in January. And we had at the booth I was working at, we had a training, like a simulation CO2, like compressed air pistol set up there. And they used pretty high compressed air that made at least the recoil feel pretty close to real.
Wow.
But not practical enough probably to use. I mean, if you only had to get a handful of shots off before you call cut on a scene, they'd probably work well. But something like that might be worth looking into maybe. But
yeah, that's a great idea. I didn't think about that. Cranking up the CO2 to the point where you actually feel it. But that would help the actors. The actors don't like it, guys. When they come into that scene, they feel like a bunch of idiots sitting there. I mean, the sound that it makes when you pull the trigger is it's barely anything, to the point where did I even shoot right now? And they want to feel as realistic. They feel like idiots and fools when the gun work that you're capturing on film isn't realistic.
Yeah, big time. Because that is, I started out this podcast, one of the first episodes, we had a gal that she's really talented at capturing the muzzle blast and the fire coming out of the end of the gun in the moment with one click of the shutter. And talking about just the, you're holding an explosion in your hand, and that's not natural. And the way your body reacts to that it's hard to replicate even as an actor if you don't actually have that experience happening to you. So I can imagine their frustration in trying to respond to that stimulus in a way that is convincing in their performance. So,
Yeah, absolutely. That was a constant frustration in every gun scene for all of the actors was, hey, I need more instruction. I need the gun to do more. I need it to feel real. Like to the point where we had a stunt guy with two apple boxes slapping them together
snapping together.
to like imitate the motion that they would feel their body recoiling when the gun went off. And even then, I was like, this is not right. So yes, if there's ideas out there on how to pull this off more realistically, guys, we are hunting. We got 2 months before we roll cameras on the rest of the series, and we are hunting for ideas on how to do that without blinks.
I'm going to try to find some ideas for you.
I mean, I would love that. I would
We'll
love
work on it.
that.
Okay, so moving on, let's talk a little bit about kind of this idea. We talked about it briefly before we started rolling, just the idea of, and you said you had some actual data to kind of back this up, so I'm curious to hear kind of your point of view on this. This idea of the power struggle in a societal collapse environment, how quickly somebody has to respond to outside threats, right? There was a scene in the Homestead film that I mentioned where, you know, that your characters are dealing with trying to overcome the idea that society has actually collapsed to the point that law and order is no longer what dictates their decision making in response to threats of violence from outside forces. What is some of your opinions or your take on that idea of I mean, how would somebody deal with that?
I think it changes pretty dramatically where you are.
Mm-hmm.
If you're in LA, a lot of people say you got 48 hours to get your situation under control before you have people knocking on your door with guns taking your stuff. If you're in Utah, Colorado, Montana, Wyoming, somewhere out here west, you probably have a few days, but based off, I spent a lot of time early in my late teens, early 20s, traveling the world, shooting all kinds of documentaries, pretty fascinating stuff. And one of the documentaries took me to Southeast Asia, and they had just recovered from a tsunami, that tragic tsunami that killed thousands and thousands of people.
Mm-hmm.
And within, in the first 48 hours, everybody's in shock. Water was accessible, clean water was somehow still accessible. There was, food floating. Within 4 or 5 days, majority of that was gone, and within a week, you had mass looting and people shooting up supply houses and robbing stores, and it was desperation. And at that point, fear ends up killing just as many people as guns and violence does. When you're scared, you respond in ways that are unhuman, and we're all
Mm-hmm.
going to do it. The sad reality is, if you and I can be God fearing, law abiding citizens, but within 72 hours to a week, um, you and I will do anything to protect ourselves, protect our family, protect people that we love. And man, it scares me. And the film kind of unpacks that a little bit, the series even more so. And I would
Mm-hmm.
love to believe that I'd be a kind and loving neighbor. But what happens when your neighbor is coming and knocking on your door and your neighbor's sick? And you don't know what sickness
Mm-hmm.
your neighbor has. Or your neighbor comes to the door and has a gun and is threatening to hurt somebody that you love or hurt you or take your stuff. Like, how do you respond in those situations is kind of the big storyline of the episodes as we get further and further in. And I don't want to give anything away, but it is a really interesting exploration. Obviously, we're playing make believe, but a lot
Mm-hmm.
of the make believe is based on real situations, mostly in other countries, of moments of catastrophic downturn and societal collapse. And what do people do, and how quickly do they become desperate? And I'm telling you, it's scary. After a week, things really, really start to fall apart, and your character and who you are goes away very, very quickly when all of a sudden your family and your life is at risk, and you're hungry and you're thirsty, And
Hmm.
I would hate to be in that situation, but at the same time, as a filmmaker, I love to kind of play make believe in that situation and experiment um, in a fictional world of what that will look like.
Hmm. Yeah, man. No, it's I don't like to think about it, but after watching, that's the thing. After watching the film like Homestead, you kind of come away just like thinking about almost the moral dilemmas, right? Like it's one thing to have a stockpile of supplies at your house or your home, food, ammo, water, all that kind of stuff. It's another thing to think about, geez, like how would you, again, one, from having a moral compass, like from a biblical perspective, how would you interact with people versus a, protect and defend mentality, right? Because I think a lot of us have this like somebody comes to my house, even a little bit of a threat, they're going to engage. But as a believer, is that the right call? Is that something we should do, right? Because doesn't biblically we're kind of called to give them the shirt off our back and not respond in conflict. And what would that how does that apply in a scenario like that for us in the States? So I think I'm stoked to see how you guys deal with some of that in story and in the coming episodes of Homestead. So because that's all stuff that's going to be, I think it's in a lot of, it's top of mind for a lot of people in the States, especially everything we've been through in the last couple of years. So I appreciate that you guys are making a story that we can watch that is, has a biblical foundation of how to approach some of those problems and challenges.
Yeah, the theme is, how do you love your neighbor when your neighbor's sick? How do you love your
Mhm.
neighbor when your neighbor may risk your family, your life, your resources? It's easy to do that in times of plenty. It's easy to do
Mhm.
that when the gas stations are running and full of gas, and grocery stores are stocked full of shelves, and money's coming in and you have a job. And that's easy. But loving your neighbor in desperation, in times of need, that's when it gets
Mhm.
really, really complex.
Dude, and it boils down to the question of how big is the God that you serve and how capable is he in real life, right? Because I think that is one of the big questions of like, we're watching Little House on the Prairie through with my kids right now, and I love watching that series because it's like it's a great kind of precursor to trying to get back to that sense of community of that exact question. Hey, the neighbor has the fever, the community has the fever. What are you going to do to help, right?
Mm.
And how do you respond? So I think that it's kind of fun, kind of having these two parallels where I've got Little House on the Prairie, Charles Ingalls and their story, and then we're watching Homestead on the other side. And it's kind of like, oh my gosh, you know, there's some parallels there. So again, I'm stoked to see what you guys come up with. What Ben? Where are you drawing your inspiration from today? What kind of content are you consuming that's getting you fired up about being a director in 2025?
Uh, I'm pretty embarrassed, honestly. Um, I have lived in a hole this last year. If I'm not filming Homestead and editing Homestead, and I do visual effects on Homestead as well, I am hanging with my kids. So I'm watching what my kids watch. So,
That's
drawing inspiration from content lately has not been a real thing, to the point where some of the producers of the show constantly are talking about the latest show on Apple TV or the latest show on Netflix, and I have to take some time in the next few weeks before we start production again to sit down and catch up on some stuff, because I'm not kidding. The last movie I saw in a theater was Minecraft, and then prior to that, I don't even remember. It's really, really bad, but I'm not creatively being inspired by much right now. So I need to dig a little deeper over the coming weeks and months before we get into full blown production for that. So
it's okay.
good
What
encouragement.
what I watch a lot of Bluey. My kids love Bluey, and then again, Little House on the Prairie has been refreshing. I like going back to some of the older series right now because there's a lot of the new stuff that is just not stuff that I necessarily want to consume. I think one of the more artistic pieces that I've watched recently that I actually enjoyed, just from like a visual art perspective, was I think it's called Severance. I think that's probably one that you guys, your producers, have been talking about, just because from a
100%.
what they do really well in that is composition. The way they frame up some of those shots is like you don't see that anymore, right?
Wow.
Like putting your principal talent down in the bottom of the lower left third, like halfway cropped. And
Yeah.
then, how they move your focus around in the frame, I think is something that show crushes at, that you just don't see in mainstream stuff right now. So if you have a chance, that would be my recommendation. Kind of a weird, I mean, I don't know, maybe if you're into the spiritual warfare stuff, maybe get prayed up, because I think there's some weird stuff in the story, but the visual, like the color, set design, all of it, I loved. So that'd be worth
Well, talking about
maybe checking
spiritual
out.
warfare projects, I'm hoping my next project off to Homestead is about spiritual warfare, and I won't say anything more, but it is horror thriller, but kind of deals with the demonic in a way that I think society, especially young people
Are
dealing
you
with
gonna?
depression and suicide,
Dude,
um, needs to be brought to life and talked about. Because so often I think the church kind of runs away from it. But
oh,
I'll tell you about
100%.
it another time. But
Sounds good.
that's the next project we're hoping to do
Is it
after
inspired by
Homestead.
this present darkness? That's what I'd be
It's
looking
definitely inspired by that.
for. Okay, then
That
sweet.
scared the crap out of me when I was a teenager.
Dude, me too. Yeah, crazy, man. But
Yeah.
hey, if you need a guy to help with, sign me up, please, because I'm trying to level up. Well, I'm hoping to do more on-camera work too, so I'm trying to fire up my acting game. I enjoy acting; it's fun, but I haven't done anything professionally other than like commercials on small budgets. So we'll see. We'll see what happens.
Well, everything I did in my teen years and the film that we won the film festival with, I was the director, the camera operator, and the
The
star. And I would literally hit record. The camera would be here. I'd hit record, and then I'd run around and be in the scene. And if it was camera movement, then I had to, get my brother to run the camera and move the camera. So I think as filmmakers, having experience on both sides of the camera and then in all of the roles
dude.
of making films, from writing to the edit to visual effects and motion graphics,
Hmm.
working as a gaffer and a grip in that department, understanding all the roles that everybody's playing on a film set makes me a better director, makes me a better
Oh
producer
yeah.
because I understand what it takes. Like if I go to the grip and go, hey, I need you to rig a 12 by 12 and the wind is blowing hard, I instantly know how hard that is or how dangerous that is.
Hmm.
If I go to the AC and go, hey, he's going to run towards you and he's going to stop 3 feet in front of the camera and you got to rack focus and keep him in perfect focus the entire time, I know how hard that is because I've AC before.
Hmm.
And so, doing all of the parts of filmmaking make me a better director, make me a better producer because I understand it. And I also know how to talk the language too. Like the amount
Yeah.
of times
Oh
I've
yeah.
showed up on
Huge.
set and everybody's being like, oh, who's this young kid? Oh, he's the director. Oh, crap. And then I go over and I talk their language and they go, oh,
Hmm.
this guy knows what he's doing. Here we go. All right. I'm excited to be a part of this project now instead of being terrified of the stupid decisions the director was going to make.
Dude, right on. That's true. That was actually, you kind of answered my question, because one of my next questions as we get close to wrapping up here was, what advice do you have for people who are up and coming that want to be the next, have dreams of being directors and producers and all that. But I think you covered it. So instead of answering that question, let's just wrap it up with this. What has been the craziest experience that you've had on a project to date? And it could be like could be a good thing, could be a bad thing, but we've all had those like moments that are top of mind when you think of like the wildest thing you've had to deal with on a project. What is yours, Ben?
Oh gosh, give me a second. And before I answer that, let me go back and add something to my previous statement about some encouragement to
You
filmmakers.
got it.
Um, I think there's so much of what we do that is, it's hard to take the first step, right?
Hmm.
I think we're always waiting for the right opportunity. Don't wait, just do it. And it's gonna suck. Like, I mean, that's the reality. You're probably only gonna want your siblings or your family to watch your first film or your first music video. Be okay with sucking because the reality is you learn so much from failure. Failure in my
Yeah.
career, in my early years, my teen years, early 20s, even 30s, I had some projects, some big budget projects that were massive failures and people don't
Mm.
watch it. People don't appreciate it. The comments that I read are quite disturbing to the point where I can't go do it. I can't go look at it anymore because it's depressing. But be prepared to fail and be okay with it. Just take the first step. I think again, so much of us as artists is like we're putting ourself out there. We're putting our heart out there to be judged and for people to look at it and go, "Well, that's not great. Well, that's not
Hmm.
entertaining at all. That's boring." but you learn from that. And so be willing to do that. My brothers are in a very successful band called For King Country. Guys, for
Mm-hmm.
7 years, they did nothing good. Nobody listened to them. No record label signed them. They played at a few little churches and bars and pubs and got 50 people, mostly friends and family, to come out and listen to their horrible music. They were awful, but guess what? They learned from their mistakes. They listened to their music. People judged them brutally, and then they realized what they needed to do to change and get better. And that's the same thing for me, and it's the same thing for every artist. No artist
Mm-hmm.
is born being good at what they're gifted to do. No artist was born being able to make a great movie or write a great poem or write a great song. The process of getting there is difficult and painful, and be ready for that. So again, I just say, go get the camera, find a friend that can edit, go make something, and let it be bad, and let people tear it apart, because you will learn so much from that. And then, man, I want to think of something recent that's been really, really difficult. When I was probably 20. I did a music video for a Christian band called LaRue,
Oh
and
yeah.
we for an entire day, 12-hour day, ran all over town shooting this awesome video. Um, and I did the classic start stop. So I was stopping when I thought I was starting, and I was starting when I was stopping the
No.
entire
Oh
day.
no. Oh no.
So literally, I got back to the edit suite the next day, extremely excited about what we captured. It was really exciting music video, and really proud of what we had accomplished the day before. Light was perfect, everything was beautiful, and looked at the footage and realized that I had stopped the entire shoot. And so what's crazy is I initially tried to save it. I tried to take the raw footage of like them like mulling around and me like talking to them between takes and try to make something out of it. And then I just had to like fess up and go to them and tell them. And then I spent 15,000 of my own dollars reshooting it. And the sad thing is it wasn't as good. The light wasn't as
Wow.
pretty. They didn't trust me because they were a little annoyed, sweet people.
Mm-hmm.
And we laugh about it now. But guys, it was the biggest failure. Technology now doesn't allow you to make those mistakes because there's lights everywhere that tell you that you're recording and you're not. I was looking through a tiny little EVF
Mm-hmm.
and stopped and started the entire day. More recent, I was filming. This is 10 years ago. I was filming in Indonesia, and this is not a massive failure, but I was filming in Indonesia. And we didn't have drones then, or if we did, they were crappy drones. And so
Mm-hmm.
we had brought in a helicopter for this big epic shot. And, I had a Canon XL2, no, XL-H1. It was actually HD. And we got into the helicopter and we talked through the plan, and there was all these safety precautions we had to take because, we had to take the
Mm-hmm.
door off the helicopter to get the shots we needed. And so we climb in and we take off, and I'm rolling, and I'm literally hanging out the helicopter on the I think they call it the sled, which is the metal
Mm-hmm.
beam that's just outside the door. And I've got one leg on that, and then I've got a guy behind me that's holding me on the helicopter, and then I've got a harness on and I'm attached in. And we're filming up there for 30 minutes, get all of this great stuff. Well, we had a HD uh, it was like a hard drive on the back of the XLH1 that was recording from
Mm-hmm.
the FireWire output.
Mm-hmm.
Well, little did I know that because of the vibrations of the helicopter, that the hard drive was corrupting all of the footage.
Oh
So we
no.
land, and we land, and the pilot comes around and goes, "Hey, let me detach you." And I step out to be detached, and he's like, "Wait, you're not latched in." And I was like, "Wait, what?" We've been
So you're
flying at thousands of feet above the ground, and he had never attached me in. So if that guy had let me go, or if I had stepped a little bit further, guys, I would have plummeted thousands of feet to my death. And then we go back, and we're all excited after we get over the shock of that I was never attached into this helicopter that had just been flying all over Indonesia in these jungles in the middle of nowhere, and realizing that I was, a mistake, an easy mistake from certain death. we get back. God protected us absolutely on that whole shoot.
Huge,
We
big,
get
yeah,
back into the
massive.
hut and we load up the hard drive. There is no footage on the hard drive. Oh, there
Uh-oh.
is, but it's like glitching,
Mm.
like unusable, complete mess. And anyways, that was a more recent massive mistake of like Ben. That's the other thing as a director. I've got to learn to let go,
Mm.
and not let go as in like plummet out of a helicopter, but let go like let another guy that's a professional helicopter videographer record the video, and
Mm-hmm.
and trust the editors and trust the guy that recommended a different camera,
Mm-hmm.
and be able to empower the people around me makes me a better filmmaker. And so much of what we do as filmmakers, it's not just how good you are, it's how good the people are around you too.
Mm-hmm.
And being able to find those people is just as much of a talent as being a gifted filmmaker yourself. And so, um, yeah, those were my two big filmmaking disasters. I can't think of one on Homestead. Homestead, there's so many people on it. We got 70 crew,
Mm-hmm.
37 cast. There's so many levels of protection. You
Mm-hmm.
know, for me to make a mistake, I have to have a lot of other people make mistakes too for it to
Mm-hmm.
show up in the film or show up in the episodes. And so, thankfully, we have a really, really good team that doesn't allow me to make massive mistakes so far. God willing, that will be the same in the coming season and episodes.
Dude, I can't even imagine. My most recent project had I was working with 4 operators. Most of them were all Green Berets, and then I had a PA and a couple of other clients that were there, and I did the whole thing. And I thought, like that was a lot, but 100 people, man, 70 crew, 30 cast, can't even imagine,
Well,
man.
and we're low budget too. I mean, guys,
Dude.
some people are going to laugh at this. We make them, we shoot our episodes for less than $1 million an episode,
Mm-hmm.
which sounds like a lot of money. But that's the other fascinating reality of filmmaking is what sounds like a lot of money 5 years ago. Now doing it, I'm like, wait, where did all the money go? And now I'm wishing for 2 million. And I bet if I got 2 million, I'd be wishing for 5 million. I mean, even
Mm-hmm.
James Cameron on Avatars had to go back to the studio and beg for more money. The reality is whatever budget you're given never feels like enough. There's never enough time in the day. There's never enough dollars. It's like the constant struggle of a filmmaker is the resources are never enough in any way.
Mm.
So that's the beauty and the chaos of filmmaking is nothing's ever enough, especially if you care about excellence.
Hey, that's part of why we love it, though, right? I mean, that's why I love behind the scenes stuff, man. I grew up watching the behind the scenes of almost every movie I loved more than I probably watched the actual movie, just because, again, for me, it's the community and the camaraderie, right? You're in it together, and again, I think that you guys got a great culture on the Homestead set. It looks like, and it's coming across in the work. So, way to crush, Ben.
Well,
I'm
and
looking forward to seeing the rest.
hearing you working on soft projects with like Green Berets and Special Force soldiers, to me, filmmaking's a lot like what they deal with. You've got
Mm-hmm.
your guys, your squad, your team that you're out there literally in the trenches, front lines, doing life together. And that's what filmmaking is. We're in the trenches together. We're not dying. Nobody's dying, so the stakes are a little less. But it does feel like life and death sometimes. When you're racing
Mm-hmm.
light and you got 30 minutes until you go into OT,
Mm-hmm.
and every hour of OT costs you tens of thousands of dollars, and you're in the trenches with the same purpose, the same mission, a lot of times away from your families in the middle of nowhere. And so I constantly compare filmmaking, obviously without the life and death element, to what I'm sure soldiers feel like on the battlefield.
Mm-hmm. Dude, there's a lot of parallels. That's why this podcast is called Guns and Cameras. It's kind of hilarious just how many things there are in common in parallel in the industries, right? But yeah, Ben, dude, I've used up an hour of your time, and I'm stoked. This has been awesome. I really appreciate you taking the time. What are some ways that people could support you in the Homestead project in the coming weeks, months, years, if any, and or where can we watch Homestead?
Yeah, so just watching it is supporting it. It is up on Angel Studios website, angel.com. You have to be a member to watch it, but you can see the movie and the few episodes that we've shot so far. And people going on there and watching it helps us continue to make it. And they say that all the time, and people, you know, kind of make fun of. We have these kind of call to actions at the end of the movie and the end of the episodes of like, help us continue to make this series. Well, the reality is we need you to watch it to help make the series. And so the more people that go on there and subscribe to watch the series is going to help us continue to make it. And then, you know, if you can help us in ideas of how to make the recoil on guns better. I'm not kidding. If somebody has a fantastic idea or weaponry that can help us pull that off, I would be forever grateful, because we're just literally in the last 48 hours had multiple conversations. And then the other thing too, if there's somebody out there that wants to help us train some of our soft guys on how to use their guns better, the amount of special forces that have seen the movie and the show that love it, but then see the gun work and go, guys, what are you doing? Like, that's not how you would hold a gun. Or if he was under fire, he'd do this. Or no, come on. You can't be reloading in the middle of that moment. Like, what is he doing? That's crazy. You're telling me that guy was Green Beret? Yeah, right. If there's anybody watching this, listening to this, that wants us to help make that more realistic, we are hunting countrywide to try and find somebody to help train some of our soldiers and our actors on
I
better
actually
gun
might,
work.
because so you guys are, let's see, you're in Utah. I have a friend of mine, one of the clients that I work with is, his name is Two Lamb. He's, Ronin Tactics is his company. Retired Green Beret, awesome guy, believer, right? Christ got a hold of him. Awesome, really cool story. I've been able to work with him and shoot some of his projects. He's based out of Colorado Springs, and he does a lot of training. He would be a great guy
Man, that would be
to
amazing.
maybe reach out to. I'll connect you guys and see if you
Yeah.
guys can have a conversation about getting him out there. He's also, fun fact, if you ever play Call of Duty, there's a playable character called the Ronin character. That is Two Lamb. They scanned him in, Activision scanned him in. So you can play as him in Call of Duty if you're a Call of Duty guy. Really neat guy. I'm going to
That sounds
connect you.
awesome.
He'd be
Yeah,
a
let's do
great
it.
guy to have on.
Yeah, that would
So
be
yeah,
amazing.
all right. Awesome, Ben. Thank you so much, bro. I appreciate your time. You guys, this is Big Guns and Cameras with Ben Smallbone. Thanks for hanging out.
Thank
Guys
you.
have a great night. Well, you guys, we are officially out of gas, which is fitting because we are at the end of this week's episode of Guns and Cameras. Y'all, I appreciate you hanging out and listening to the stories of director Ben Smallbone. Ben comes from a legendary family of creators, and it's fitting because the work that he is doing on the Homestead film and the Homestead series is just absolutely incredible. If you haven't had a chance to watch it, I strongly encourage you to go check it out. I really hope you guys heard the part where he said, don't wait to create, just go do it. You're gonna suck, we all suck at first, but you have to push through that first suckage part before you get to grow and become a truly great storyteller. So don't think you need to have it all together. Just go do, start doing. Go do something awesome this week, you guys. And stay tuned because we got a lot of awesome coming down the pipeline for Guns and Cameras, assuming that the apocalypse doesn't kick off here soon. So thanks for hanging out. You guys stay safe, stay sane, and we'll catch you on the next one.